came on quick. Doesn't usually. In the video I made today, I was explaining that. Well, one of the things I explained was that the centre left, the system liberal left, do not care about us. They're enabling, propping up the state superstructure, the status quo, meaning all the big meaty stuff, capitalism, that vast inequality, billionaires to the very poor, the military, the American wars, the American empire. They're very selectively liberal, and they're basically not left at all. They're very, very, very right wing. But they're linked to us. They've linked to us. Like, I don't know, what's the point? So they're a problem. They're a problem. They're basically Tories on steroids. And there's been political realignment. And you can see this in the States, that the Democrats are well to the right of the Republicans on foreign wars, on being right wing, on they're closer to Reagan than anything else, whereas the Republicans are pretty much anti-war and Russia-Ukraine, aren't they, and stuff like that. And we have to recognise there's this kind of realignment that's weird that's taken place, where the left has become right and the right has become left. And that you say, what? It's a state superstructure, it's all a game. Of course it is, I understand this. But to just ignore it completely is a bit weird, because we have to, because these are people, and we want a national unity. You can't just therefore ignore the whole nation. You see what I mean? So when people are being propagandized, and what's happening here is that the political people, the conservatives, are all going into the left box, and the left box are all going into the right box. And then if one of them's in government, then they sort of like start moving around both of them, because as time goes on, you lose popularity in government, even with the propaganda, because propaganda is for the state, it's not for you as such, it's for all of you. And then, so the herding of Republicans in America, for example, has been to put them in the pacifist box. But propaganda can change, and they can be reherded back into the pro-war box. So Republicans are always getting accused of being Putin puppets, but they've just been. This is simply because they've been herded into a pacifist box, and therefore the Democrats are calling them Putin puppets because they don't want to go to war with Russia. They think that the American empire is the worst thing, and it's really strange, because those on the left who haven't moved are suddenly in with all these Republicans, well, Trumpist type Republicans, which is really weird, because Trump is an absolute moron. So, and then you get as well redistribution. I looked at studies in the US, which shows we're dealing with an iceberg here. The tip of the iceberg is the open world party politics, Republican, Democrat, a massive amount of the icebergs beneath, that's the state. That's the state proper. I mean, when the Nazis took control of the state, right, they knew they had to take more than the tip of the iceberg. They were taking control of the military, what the UK would call the civil service, the news media, the propaganda. That's famous for them, isn't it? They knew what the state was. They knew it wasn't just, are you right wing, vote for us. They took control of the whole bloody lot, which with catastrophic consequences for minorities, which they call them minorities combined. They took several million people that were killed. So, but when we're dealing with the tip of the iceberg, I suppose these Trumpist Republicans are more redistributive than the Democrats in what they want. And compared to the right wing of the Republican Party, the Reaganite types, they are like way left, the opposites. And Rand Paul's a libertarian Republican. He would have fit in with the 80s, and he basically lambasts this Trumpist Republican Party as communal. It's exaggerating as usual, because it's always exaggerated from those economic right-wingers about anyone who wants redistribution. They're always called communists, Marxists, commies, Stalinists, give them whatever Russian Soviet sounding thing you can. And it's not true, obviously. It's certainly not true. I mean, I always put it like this. America's free education for 16-year-olds, so is that commie? And the problem I always think every time I put that question out there, I always think that the Republicans would answer back, yes, it is. It's insane and nuts. But this, so like you get Rand Paul speaking in Congress, like slating off what is now probably the dominant part of the Republican Party and slagging them off as communists. And he's not alone. All the Reaganites, all the ones on the right do that. All the 80s types do that. And it's just nuts. It's just crazy. It's just absolutely insane. I mean, communism means a planned economy, not a market economy. So if America, for example, had universal healthcare, it'd still be a market capitalist economy. It's a market, right? You go on the street, businesses are like entrepreneurs set them businesses up. It's not the state planning, telling them how many socks they can produce and sell. Goodness sake. It's like, on one hand, the commie label is a dumb part of the propaganda matrix. But think more carefully here. It actually works to some extent. So despite being really dumb, it's also quite intelligent. But I do think that some of the ones who push this out aren't thinking the propaganda matrix strategically and then working out that this is quite intelligent. I think they're just being dumb. Yeah, strangely enough, it works out quite intelligent. And that's really suspicious, isn't it? Really gets the mind thinking, what's going on here? Because we had it in Britain in the 40s saying that if we introduce NHS and welfare state, that's it. Britain is Soviet, Russian, communist, all that stuff, right? So by that reckoning, the Thatcher era was Soviet, communist, etc., because she presided over a national health service and welfare state. You can't have it both ways. You can't be both commie and not commie, depending on, whatever. And it's interesting that the same people who said all this would be absolute communism when it was coming out, supported it in the 50s. So, are they communists then? You see what I mean? Some people, I'm on the truth side. I don't want all this propaganda. It's insane. It's nuts. It's crazy. It's mad. But it exists. It exists. And some of the people who say this get support from people who have been poisoned and brainwashed by all this crap. Look, I always like to look at America now because it gives a bit of space. You know what I mean? A bit of space between us. If it's always just yourself in Britain at this moment in time, then you're part of that brainwashed. You know what I mean? So I suppose this is what worked for Americans watching this then. From a British perspective, we can see that Americans are brainwashed by this communist stuff about the healthcare issue because we've been through it and we grew out of it. Yeah, but look, so this realignment that's gone on the tip of the iceberg is dangerous because it can be reherded all over the place. Nevertheless, we have to deal with it. I have to think if these people, so there's equivalent red wall in the UK, which could be like mildly similar to the Trumpian stuff in America, except to say that Trump has no support in Britain. Basically, no support. And when I look at the figures, they're astronomically terrible. That's something he'll never admit. I said, "Oh, the Brits love me," as well. It's got it's terrible. It's like really, it's like 80% against him, something like that. I've looked at the figures on YouGov, and they're absolutely terrible. And they don't go up much when it goes with one demographic to another. It's like a national consensus against him, which he would absolutely never admit in a million years. They did. Oh, did you go about fixing the figures? I want a recount. But there we go. But we've got a milder version equivalent of red wall, but it's always been there. This, by the way, in the sense that a lot of working class areas have always been economically left wing and socially right wing. You know what I mean? They've got the prejudices, but they've got the economic left. So it's always been like that. It's just been fleshed out in recent years, if you know what I mean. So I used to think when people used to say that working class areas are Benite, for example, I think, well, sort of on all the money stuff and all the redistribution stuff, but on the social stuff they're not. On the social stuff they're more prejudiced than Ben. So like Ben sort of suits. I mean, no one's saying everyone's the same. Of course not. Of course not. And I think that when you're working class go to uni and stuff, when they become middle class professionals, they sort of like keep the working class roots with the money, but they ditch the prejudice stuff and they're more like egalitarian per se, for equality per se. And I think that's pretty obvious. Of course, there's exceptions. We hear about class traitors, for example. So this realignment that's happened now is really, really weird. It's part of a propaganda matrix doing musical chairs on steroids. But because I think that warmongering is even worse than racism, this anti-war sentiment on the like red wall and the Trumpian stuff, it's really important. It's really important because it unites with the left that is not system liberal left. You know, we're ones that really are liberal and left. You know what I mean? We're not bloody well fake because we're not. The state system, the system liberal left is for the military state, the US empire, for the vast economic and income inequality that has people homeless at the bottom and billionaires at the top. They're basically Tories on steroids. And they are not with us at all. They're just fake with us. They're not with us at all. They're just totally and utterly not with us. So I want to make that clear when I talk about kind of like some kind of collaboration or whatever you want to call it to try and get state superstructure crashing down. Our collaboration is not with the system liberal left. They are not on our side. They are in exactly the same bracket as, say, Rishi Sunak and his government. They're exactly that sort of situation. So our connection would have to be with the anti-war red wall types, who I think are being herded, but basically, well, you have to admit that everyone's within this state superstructure propaganda matrix system's always being herded. So we can't dismiss it because of that. That we can make alliance with them on anti-war stuff, and also potentially on redistribution as well. And this is pretty important, isn't it? So you said so. The system liberal left, they need educating. I mean, it's really weird because they're educated already, but they're sort of like caught by the web, caught by the spider's web, they're entangled in it, and it's so strange that because it's like the only way they connect with us at all is on demographic and vibe. Vibe means nothing, so that's dismissed instantly. So you've got demographic left, and you're thinking, well, they're meant to be they're meant to be bloody radical, but they're not. They're not. So what do you go on? What they're meant to be, or what they actually are? What the reality is? You know what I mean? It's like it's like saying the anti system, the anti system left should have been in cahoots with the Liberal Democrats for the last 7 years. Well, where would that have got us? Nowhere. Whether even if the Liberals had more support, more power over them 7 years, it wouldn't have made it. Even if they had the most support, it wouldn't have made any difference. And it's like saying that. It's like you know, the Liberals were pushed to the side by Labour in the 20s for a reason. And I don't think we can, you know what I mean? And now Labour have become the Liberals. So like this attempt to get something means we have to align with the anti-war right. Well, the anti-war, we can't call them right for anti-war. You know what I mean? The anti-war red wall in the UK. Get them on redistribution as well. Our side on that. So that would be like a red wall anti-system left unity. Now you say, well, what's the difference between you and the red wall? Well, I would say that that they're being herded. So I think that's a crucial difference. They're unreliable. They're unreliable in the long term. They're unreliable because they're possessed. So we're like borrowing them, if you know what I mean. I mean, but we're doing it with a bloody brain. Well, when Johnson did it, he sort of knew we were borrowing them, but sort of it doesn't work for the Tories because they're bound to split off from them. It's like it was a bad long-term policy to rely on socialists to help the Tories because it's just not looking ahead. I think the Tories were, from a pure power position, were a lot more sensible in the 80s where they had a long-term perspective, where they thought if we get the southeast and we on tax cuts, we can actually last. But trying to get the red wall on the Tory side, it's obviously going to split because the problem is that like Jacob Rees-Mogg are not like people from Redcar. You know what I mean? You're just going to end up falling out big time. So like, you know, so the borrowing we're doing, I suggest with the red wall is more sensible than what the Tories did. I know that these are unreliable because they can be herded, but they're not as unreliable as they are the Tories. So like, I admit the Tories in the 80s did the right stuff for themselves. They were like really looking ahead. Now they're just looking, you know, just with Johnson, they're just looking ahead for himself, you know, purely. They had no strategy really beyond. They couldn't look beyond the end of their own arm. That's what I think, anyway. And I think it's been shown and lost them all already. Whereas in the 80s, Tories could keep the South East for like 15 odd bloody years, not just like 15 bloody minutes. And you know they'd have scandals in the 80s and just be water off the duck's back compared to like what because the support had more strength to it, you know, within this propaganda matrix, within this tip of the iceberg stuff. And whereas now I could see that it's so flaky. That was the word I've always used, flaky. And that's what it is for all of them. Because they're not genuine, they're not authentic, they haven't got substance, they aren't meat. They're just chocolate flakes, they just crumble. That is just an absolute disaster. And it's just like, that's the tip of the iceberg, but it's sort of to our advantage because the state superstructure has to fail. But it's just the tip of the iceberg of the state superstructure, though. So we can take the red wall with us, but we have to get something from our own demographic that are educated in being through uni and are rejecting the system, but at the moment are actually support is propping it up. And it's like that's the big one. How do we get them? How do we get them on our side? against the state superstructure? It's a huge question. It must be asked, and I'm thinking the answer is this: just like the Tories are a mess. Eventually, the Tories too, which is Starmer's lot of Tories, they'll be a mess because they're all bloody the same. They're all going to bloody end the same because they're all bloody are the same. Why would it make any difference? So they're going to get in a mess, right? Because they're not really working for us, they're working for themselves. They're working for the state superstructure. They're working for the real government, which is a state superstructure. When the educated system, liberal left, see that, there'll be a fight in our hands. There's two places they'll go to, I think. Well, 2.5 perhaps. There's the Liberal Democrats. Please don't do that. If you do that, they're just being reherded. They make no difference. State superstructure will not be changed one iota. Or they can come at us and see through the whole damn charade, the whole farce. That it's just they're just being. If you've got Liberal Democrats, they're just being reherded. It's a new cage, offering the same stuff with the same state superstructure, rather than having a red badge. They've got a yellow badge. That's the only difference. Nothing would change. Liberal Democrats already rate Starmer higher than Labour, right? So they're just going to something that is more Starmerite than what they've rejected for being Starmerite. That's all they would be doing. Going to Starmer on steroids. Going to Starmer's real home. No, his exact home. For if you, I'm saying state superstructure is all one thing, but the Liberal Democrats want him like a transfer signing. So what is the point of going from there to them? It's like going to Santa because you're against Christmas. Don't do that. Come to us, who are real and genuine, and against the person you're against. So that's what we need to hope happens. We need to hope they see sense. Now, at that same time, Tories won, which is the Sunak type Tory party, will hopefully be splitting in 2 or 3 parties. So they're just destroyed. And with Starmer's destroyed because they come to us, that is the goal. I think it could also be helped by the AI revolution harming the middle class. That would radicalise them politically. It's got to happen because this is a beyond the joke. So we want in the UK, we want the red wall on our side. That's us. Red wall was relatively herded, relatively got consistent principles. And when Tories 2 fell, then we get them because they'd be politically radicalised. Our risk with them is that they go to the Liberal Democrats, which would be a profound mistake on their part. That they've done nothing. They've just gone from. I mean, they're already going from Starmer or from Sunak to Sunak. You know what I mean? What I mean is they're the same. They're already Liberal Democrats. They already are that. That's what. Well, I don't think they're selectively liberal, and the Democrats is just a bloody. It's just a meaningless word. But you know what I mean. There is no difference. They're just herded. They're just musical chairs, same thing, and they're just going. They have to see through that. See through that. It's bloody obvious once you see through it. It's all obvious. They have to see through that. So we need to win over our opposition, which is Starmer. Sorry, it's Tory 2. If we can get those won over us, or a substantial chunk of them, they'll be educated middle class types. Get to us. Don't stick with this. Please, 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 please. And I do think that it's going to require some kind of AI catastrophe for this to happen. We need the Elon Musk, Ray Kurzweil view of the AI revolution to happen. Because if it doesn't happen, then I fear that we're going to have the state superstructure propaganda matrix forever. That can't happen. We must have the collapse of the middle class so that they get radicalized. It must happen. It must happen. It must happen very soon as well. This is enough. We've had enough. Fed up. We've had this for 80 years of what I call that showing their naked ass in our face and giving us the finger. It's time that they were showing the naked ass and the finger. See how they like it. And we'll shunt them out for 80 fucking years. That'd be nice. End the video. End the stream.